Elena's carefully constructed academic distance crumbled when Takoda's hands guided hers over the wooden carving, igniting desires no dissertation could explain. His warning, "I can't control myself when I'm with you," should have sent her running back to Chicago, but instead she found herself surrendering to the thunder of her heartbeat. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The endless stretch of Arizona highway shimmered under the relentless afternoon sun, heat waves dancing like spirits above the cracked asphalt. Elena Winters gripped the steering wheel of her rented sedan, the air conditioner fighting a losing battle against the desert's unforgiving breath. Her GPS had lost signal 20 minutes ago, and the map she'd printed as a precaution now sat useless on the passenger seat, its highlighted route leading nowhere near where she found herself. "This is just perfect," she muttered, pushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. The dashboard thermometer read 102 degrees, and the rental car's engine had begun making an ominous clicking sound that grew louder with each passing mile. 3 days ago, Elena had been in her comfortable Chicago apartment, surrounded by stacks of research papers and anthropology journals, the familiar sounds of city traffic providing a soothing backdrop to her work. Now, she was hopelessly lost in the Arizona wilderness, chasing a dissertation that suddenly seemed far less important than finding water and shelter. The car shuddered, then coughed, before a plume of white smoke erupted from beneath the hood. Elena slammed her palm against the steering wheel in frustration as the vehicle rolled to a stop. "No, no, no!" she cried, fumbling for her cell phone. "No service." "Of course." She stepped out of the car, the heat hitting her like a physical force. The landscape stretched before her, a vast emptiness punctuated by red rock formations and sparse vegetation, beauty and desolation in equal measure. In another situation, she might have appreciated the raw majesty of it all. This was, after all, what she had come to study, the sacred connection between the Apache people and this ancient land. But right now, all Elena could think about was how quickly dehydration could set in under this merciless sun. Grabbing her backpack, she filled it with essentials, water bottles, energy bars, her research notebook, and the small camera she'd brought to document her findings. She locked the useless car and began walking, following what appeared to be a dirt road, winding between two distant mesas. An hour later, her water half gone, and her fair skin burning despite the sunscreen she'd applied, Elena spotted something that made her heart leap, a structure in the distance. As she drew closer, she could make out a modest wooden cabin nestled against the hillside, smoke rising from a stone chimney despite the heat. She approached cautiously, relief and apprehension mingling in her chest. This was reservation land, she knew. Her research grant had included proper permissions to visit certain areas for interviews, but she hadn't planned on arriving like this, desperate and uninvited. 20 yards from the cabin, a figure emerged from behind a woodpile. Elena stopped in her tracks. He stood tall and imposing, arms crossed over a broad chest, long black hair pulled back at the nape of his neck. His features were sharp and weathered, eyes dark beneath heavy brows that were now drawn together in suspicion. He wore faded jeans and a simple chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and adorned with a single leather bracelet. "You're trespassing," he said, his voice deep and unwelcoming. Elena swallowed hard. "I'm sorry. My car broke down a few miles back. I'm with the University of Chicago. I have permission to be on the reservation for research purposes, but I got lost. And the heat." She was babbling now, aware of how ridiculous she must sound. The man's expression didn't soften, but his eyes traveled over her sun-reddened face and the backpack clutched in her trembling hands. "What research?" he asked flatly. Cultural anthropology. I'm studying the spiritual connection between indigenous peoples and their ancestral lands, specifically focusing on Apache traditions. The academic words felt pompous and hollow out here in the dust. He studied her for a long moment, as if weighing something in his mind. Then, without a word, he turned and walked toward the cabin, stopping at the door to look back at her. "You can call someone from here," he said. "Then you leave." Elena nearly collapsed with relief. "Thank you. I'm Elena. Elena Winters." He paused, hand on the wooden doorframe. "Takoda," he replied, offering nothing more before disappearing inside. Elena stood motionless, gathering her strength before following him. The name echoed in her mind. Takoda. In Dakota Sioux, it meant friend to everyone. She found herself wondering if the name was fitting or deeply ironic, given his cold reception. As she stepped toward the cabin, a gust of wind swept across the landscape, carrying the scent of sage and desert rain. Elena couldn't have known then how this unplanned detour would alter the course of her carefully plotted life, how this man with the unwelcoming eyes would awaken something in her that had lain dormant beneath years of academic ambition and city routine. The wooden door creaked as she pushed it open, stepping from blinding sunlight into cool shadow. And as her eyes adjusted to the dimness, Elena Winters crossed a threshold that would lead her not just into a stranger's home, but into an unexpected journey of the heart. The interior of Takoda's cabin was unlike anything Elena had expected. Instead of the sparse, utilitarian space she had imagined, she found herself surrounded by a world of craftsmanship and quiet beauty. Polished wooden shelves lined the walls, holding an array of intricately carved figures: bears, eagles, wolves, each seemingly caught in mid-motion, as if they might continue their journey should you look away. Hand-woven blankets in rich earth tones draped over a simple but elegant wooden couch, and the scent of cedar and sage hung in the air. Takoda moved to a small kitchenette in the corner, filling a glass with water without a word. He handed it to her, his fingers momentarily brushing against hers. Elena noticed the calluses on his hands, the small scars that told stories of a life spent creating, building, surviving. "Thank you," she said, drinking deeply. The water was cool and refreshing, tasting faintly of minerals. Natural spring water, she guessed. Not the filtered city water she was accustomed to. Takoda gestured to a wooden chair. "Sit, phone's there." He nodded toward an old landline mounted on the wall, something Elena hadn't seen in years. She lowered herself onto the chair, suddenly aware of her disheveled appearance, her once neat ponytail now falling loose around her face, her light blue blouse darkened with sweat in patches, her khaki pants covered in dust from the road. "Do you live here alone?" she asked, trying to fill the uncomfortable silence as she dialed the roadside assistance number from her rental agreement. Takoda was busy stoking the fire in a stone hearth, his back to her. "Yes." After 17 minutes on hold, Elena finally reached a representative who promised to send a tow truck, but warned it might not arrive until morning due to their remote location. Elena's heart sank as she hung up the phone. "They can't come until tomorrow," she said, the reality of her situation hitting her fully. "I'm so sorry to impose, but is there any way I could stay here tonight? I can pay you, of course." She reached for her backpack, fumbling for her wallet. Takoda's expression hardened. "I don't need your money." "I didn't mean to offend," Elena said quickly. "I just don't want to be a burden." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed, the sound like wind through desert canyons. "You can sleep here. I'll take the back room." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you, really." As dusk settled over the landscape, Takoda prepared a simple meal: bean stew with cornbread and wild greens Elena didn't recognize. They ate mostly in silence, broken only by the crackling fire and Elena's occasional attempts at conversation. "These carvings are beautiful," she said, gesturing to the wooden figures. "Did you make them?" Takoda nodded once, focused on his food. "How long have you been carving?" He looked up, meeting her eyes for the first time since she'd entered his home. "Since I could hold a knife, my grandfather taught me." Something in his tone invited no further questions, but Elena couldn't help herself. This was what she had come here for after all, to understand the connections between people and their heritage. "Is your family nearby?" she asked. "No." He set down his spoon. "Why are you really here, Dr. Winters?" The formal title caught her off guard. "I'm not a doctor yet. That's why I'm here, completing research for my dissertation. And please, call me Elena." "Your dissertation," he repeated, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. "So we're what to you? Research subjects? Interesting cultural specimens?" Elena flinched at his directness. "That's not how I see it. I'm trying to understand and document the spiritual connection indigenous peoples maintain with their ancestral lands, especially in the face of modernization and outside pressures. I want to help preserve these traditions, these perspectives." "Help preserve," Takoda echoed with a bitter laugh, "like we're endangered animals needing a conservation effort." Elena set down her spoon, frustration rising in her chest. "That's not fair. I'm here to learn, not to judge or categorize. I believe these connections to land and tradition hold wisdom that the modern world desperately needs." Something shifted in Takoda's expression, not quite softening, but a flicker of reassessment. He stood, gathering their empty bowls. "It gets cold at night. There are extra blankets in the chest." With that, he disappeared into a back room, leaving Elena alone with the dying fire and her troubled thoughts. Later, as she lay on the surprisingly comfortable couch beneath two hand-woven blankets, Elena stared at the wooden ceiling beams illuminated by moonlight streaming through a small window. The carvings seemed to watch her from the shadows, silent witnesses to her intrusion into this man's solitary life. She thought about Takoda's reaction to her research, the barely concealed resentment in his voice. Had she been naive, thinking she could simply arrive here and be welcomed into a culture she understood only through books and articles? Was he right to see her as just another outsider seeking to study what she could never truly understand? Outside, an owl called into the night, its voice lonely and haunting. Elena pulled the blankets tighter around her shoulders, feeling smaller than she had in years. In Chicago, surrounded by her academic peers and impressive credentials, she moved with confidence and purpose. Here, in this wooden cabin with a man who clearly wanted nothing to do with her or her research, she felt like a child, ignorant and unwelcome. Just as she was drifting to sleep, she heard Takoda's voice from the other room, low, melodic, in a language she didn't understand. He was singing, she realized with surprise. The sound was mesmerizing, rising and falling, like the contours of the landscape around them. Elena closed her eyes, letting the unfamiliar music wash over her, carrying her into dreams of red earth and endless skies. And somewhere in those dreams, a man with dark eyes and skilled hands carved stories into wood, preserving memories that existed long before her questions and would endure long after she was gone. Morning arrived with the gentle patter of rain against the cabin's roof. Elena woke disoriented, momentarily forgetting where she was, until her eyes settled on the wooden carvings watching her from their shelves. The previous day's events came rushing back, her broken-down car, the unforgiving desert heat, and Takoda, the reluctant host with eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. The main room was empty, though the lingering scent of coffee suggested Takoda had already been up for some time. Elena folded the blankets neatly, smoothing her rumpled clothes as best she could. A quick glance out the window revealed sheets of rain falling steadily, turning the red earth to rust-colored mud. So much for desert dryness. The front door opened with a creak, and Takoda stepped inside, water dripping from his hair and jacket. He carried a plastic bag bearing the logo of a general store. "You're up," he observed, setting the bag on the small wooden table. "Roads washed out, no tow truck today." Elena's heart sank. Washed out? For how long? Depends on the rain, could be hours, could be days. He began unpacking the bag. Bread, canned soup, coffee, and a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Days," Elena echoed, dismayed. "But I can't stay here for days. I have interviews scheduled at the community center, people expecting me." Takoda looked up, his expression unchanged. "Call them. Phone still works." He pushed the brown paper package toward her. "Thought you might need this." Elena unwrapped it to find a simple white t-shirt and a toothbrush still in its packaging. The unexpected thoughtfulness caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's very kind." He shrugged, turning away to hang his wet jacket on a hook by the door. "Bathroom's through there if you want to clean up." The bathroom, like the rest of the cabin, was simple but well-crafted. A copper sink sat atop a wooden vanity, and the shower stall was lined with smooth river stones. Elena washed her face with cold water and changed into the t-shirt, which hung loose on her frame but felt wonderfully clean. When she emerged, Takoda was seated at a workbench near the window, a block of wood and various carving tools laid out before him. His large hands moved with surprising delicacy, peeling away thin curls of cedar to reveal whatever form waited beneath. "Do you mind if I watch?" Elena asked, approaching cautiously. He didn't look up. Free country. Elena sat on a nearby stool, observing the methodical way his hands worked the wood. After several minutes of silence, her curiosity got the better of her. "What are you making?" Takoda paused, turning the half-formed carving in his hands. The beginnings of a bird were taking shape, wings folded against its body, head tilted as if listening. "Hummingbird," he said. "For my niece. Her birthday's next week." It was the most he'd volunteered about himself since they met, and Elena seized the opening. "You have family on the reservation? Sister and her husband, 2 kids." His knife resumed its careful work, shaving away minuscule pieces of wood with precision. Elena watched, mesmerized by the transformation happening beneath his fingers. "How do you know what to cut away?" she asked. "How do you see the bird in the block?" Takoda's hands stilled. He looked at her directly, and for the first time, his expression wasn't guarded or suspicious, just thoughtful. "It's already there," he said simply. "I just help it out." Something about his words resonated with Elena. Wasn't that what she tried to do with her research? Uncover the connections and meanings that were already there, just waiting to be revealed? "I think I understand," she said. His dark eyes studied her for a moment, as if reassessing her. Then he held out the wood and a small knife. "Show me." Elena blinked in surprise. "Oh no, I couldn't. I've never—" "Try," he insisted, placing the tools in her hesitant hands. The wood was smooth and warm, shaped by his touch. Elena turned it over, feeling its weight and grain. The knife felt dangerous in her unpracticed fingers. "I don't want to ruin it," she admitted. "You won't," he said, moving to stand behind her. "Hold it like this." His hands covered hers, positioning her fingers properly on the knife and wood. His chest was warm against her back, his breath stirring the hair near her ear. "Follow the grain, not against it." Elena swallowed, suddenly aware of how close he was, how his calloused fingers guided hers with gentle pressure. She tried to focus on the wood, not on the warmth of his hands or the faint scent of pine and smoke that seemed to cling to him. Under his guidance, she managed to shave off a thin curl of wood. Another followed, and another. The hummingbird's wing emerged a little more clearly with each cut. "I'm doing it," she whispered, surprised. "You are," he agreed, his voice low and close to her ear. When he stepped away, Elena felt a curious sense of loss. The knife suddenly felt awkward in her hand, without his guidance. Outside, the rain continued to fall, drumming against the roof and windows. But inside the cabin, something had shifted. A small crack in the wall between them, letting in a glimmer of understanding. Takoda returned to his chair, watching as Elena continued her tentative work on the carving. "You have steady hands," he observed. "Good for this kind of work." Elena smiled, looking up from the wooden bird. "Different from my usual tools. Normally I'm taking notes or typing on my laptop." "Words," he said with a slight nod. "My grandfather used to say the problem with writing things down is that people start believing the paper knows more than the person." The insight struck her, challenging years of academic training. "Sometimes I think he might be right," she admitted, surprising herself with the confession. By the afternoon, the rain had settled into a steady drizzle, casting the landscape in muted shades of grey and rust. Takoda had gone to check on a leak in the workshop behind his cabin, leaving Elena alone with her thoughts and the half-carved hummingbird. She wandered around the main room, examining the carvings more carefully now. Each piece told a story, not just in the subjects depicted, but in the care with which they were created. A family of wolves, heads raised in silent howl. An eagle in flight, each feather distinct and precise. A bear standing protectively over its cubs. Her eyes fell on a framed photograph nearly hidden behind several carvings, the only personal item she'd seen in the cabin. Elena moved closer, curious. The photo showed a younger Takoda in military fatigues, arms slung around another soldier's shoulders, both men grinning beneath a harsh sun. Afghanistan or Iraq, she guessed, recognizing the desert backdrop. "That was my second tour." Elena startled, nearly knocking over a carving. Takoda stood in the doorway, watching her with unreadable eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry," she said quickly. He crossed the room and picked up the frame, looking at it for a long moment before setting it back in place. "Ryan Wilson. We served together for 4 years. He died 2 weeks after this was taken." The simple statement hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken grief. "I'm so sorry," Elena said softly. Takoda nodded once, acknowledging her words without inviting further discussion. He moved to the kitchen area, filling a kettle with water and placing it on the small stove. Elena remained by the shelves, processing this new information. A military veteran. It explained certain things about him, the precision of his movements, the watchfulness in his eyes, the way he seemed to evaluate situations before acting. "How long did you serve?" she asked. 8 years. Army Rangers." He measured coffee grounds into 2 mugs. "You said you're from Chicago." The sudden redirection of conversation caught Elena off guard. "Yes, South Side originally. I live near the university now." "Long way from home," he observed. "I suppose so." Elena leaned against the counter, watching him prepare the coffee with the same careful attention he gave to his carvings. "But then, I've always been drawn to places different from where I grew up." "Running from something?" There was no judgment in his tone, just quiet curiosity. Elena considered the question, surprised by its perceptiveness. Maybe, in a way. The expectations, perhaps. "My father is a corporate attorney, my mother a surgeon. They had my life planned out before I could walk. Prestigious schools, medical degree, suitable husband from a good family." She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. "Anthropology wasn't in their blueprint." "But it was in yours," Takoda said, pouring hot water over the grounds. "Yes." She accepted the mug he offered, their fingers brushing briefly. "I've always been fascinated by how people connect to places, to traditions, how identity is shaped by land and community." She took a sip of the strong coffee. "What about you? Did you always know you'd come back here after the military?" A shadow crossed his face. No, I thought I was done with reservation life. Planned to make a career in the army, maybe settle in Colorado after. He looked toward the window where rain continued to fall. Came back when my grandfather was dying. Meant to stay a few weeks. That was 4 years ago. What made you stay? Elena asked gently. Takoda was quiet for a long moment. He asked me to, he finally said. His last words to me. Remember who you are, where you come from. This land needs someone to speak for it. He shook his head slightly. Couldn't say no to that. The simple honesty of his answer moved her. This was the kind of connection she'd been hoping to understand in her research, the profound, often complicated ties between people and their ancestral lands. Your grandfather sounds like a wise man, she said. He was. Takoda's expression softened slightly with the memory. Traditional carver, medicine man, knew every plant in these hills and what it was good for. Elena thought of her own grandparents, her grandmother's country club memberships, her grandfather's rare art collection. Different worlds, different values. Is that why you carve? To carry on his tradition? Takoda considered her question. Partly, but also because wood remembers. Each piece holds the memory of the tree it came from, the earth it grew in, the rain and sun that shaped it. His fingers trace the grain of the wooden countertop. When I carve, I'm not creating something new. I'm revealing what was already there, what the wood remembers. His words resonated with a depth that took Elena by surprise. Here, in this simple cabin, was the kind of insight she'd been searching for in academic journals and ethnographic studies. That's beautiful, she said honestly. Their eyes met, and something shifted in Takoda's gaze. A recognition, perhaps, that despite their differences, she was truly listening, truly seeking to understand. The moment stretched between them, broken only when the phone on the wall rang, its shrill tones startling them both. Takoda answered it, his expression growing serious as he listened. I understand. Yes, she's still here. He glanced at Elena. Tomorrow morning, if the creek's down, yes. He hung up and turned to her. That was Sam from the garage. Road should be passable by morning. He'll come get your car then. Oh. The news, which should have brought relief, instead left Elena with an unexpected hollow feeling. That's good. Takoda studied her face. You seem disappointed. No, of course not. She forced a smile. I've imposed on you long enough. He held her gaze for a beat too long, as if searching for something in her expression. Then he nodded once and moved toward the door. Need to check the rain barrels, he said, shrugging into his jacket. Feel free to use the phone if you need to make calls. After he left, Elena stood alone in the cabin, listening to the rain and feeling strangely reluctant to reach for the phone. Tomorrow, she would return to her planned research, her scheduled interviews, her academic routine. And Takoda would return to his solitary life, carving memories from wood in this quiet cabin, far from the world she knew. Somehow, the thought brought no satisfaction. The rain continued throughout the afternoon, transforming the landscape outside the cabin into a painting of blurred edges and muted colors. Elena had made her necessary calls, rescheduling her interviews, updating her advisor, arranging for her car repair. Each conversation pulled her back toward her other life, reminding her of deadlines and expectations waiting just beyond these wooden walls. As dusk approached, Takoda returned with an armful of firewood, his hair damp and his boots caked with mud. He stacked the logs beside the hearth, then knelt to rebuild the fire that had died down to embers. Weather report says the storm's moving east, he said, arranging kindling beneath the larger pieces. Should be clear by morning. Elena nodded, feeling that hollow sensation return at the thought of leaving. That's good news. There's stew left over from yesterday. Should I heat some up? He asked, surprising her with the offer. "Let me help," she said, moving to the small kitchen area. "It's the least I can do after you've put up with me for 2 days." Takoda's mouth quirked in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "You're not as disruptive as I expected." "High praise," Elena laughed, the sound warming the space between them. "And here I thought I was being a terrible burden on your solitude." "I've had worse house guests," he said, striking a match to light the fire. "My sister's kids, for instance, tornado in sneakers, both of them." The image of Takoda with children, likely the niece and nephew he'd mentioned, softened something in Elena's perception of him. She imagined his large, careful hands helping small fingers grip a carving knife, teaching the next generation as his grandfather had taught him. While Takoda tended the fire, Elena reheated the stew, adding a pinch of salt and some dried herbs she found in a small jar on the counter. The domestic rhythm felt surprisingly natural, as if they'd done this many times before. They ate at the small wooden table near the window, watching darkness settle over the land. The rain had slowed to a gentle patter, and distant lightning occasionally illuminated the mountains on the horizon. "Is it always this beautiful after rain?" Elena asked, gazing out at the landscape transformed by water and twilight. "No," Takoda said simply. "It's different every time. That's what people don't understand about this place. It's never the same twice." Elena turned to him. "Like the wood you carve." His eyes met hers, surprise and something like appreciation flickering in their depths. "Yes," he said, "exactly like that." After dinner, they sat before the crackling fire, the warmth and light creating an intimate atmosphere that seemed to exist outside of normal time. Elena found herself studying Takoda's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crease between his brows, the way the firelight played across the planes of his face. "Will you tell me about your grandfather?" she asked softly. "The medicine man?" Takoda was silent for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then his deep voice filled the space between them. His name was Nahimana, mystic in our language. He could read the weather from how the hawks flew, knew when someone was sick before they showed symptoms. Takoda's fingers traced an invisible pattern on the arm of his chair. He was respected, even by people who didn't believe in the old ways. "Were you close to him growing up?" "Yes and no. I spent summers with him, learned to hunt and track, to listen to the land. But I was also the kid with the science books, asking questions he thought were missing the point." A faint smile touched his lips. He'd say, "Takoda, you want to know how the rain forms in the clouds, but you don't ask why it chooses to fall today instead of tomorrow." Elena smiled at that. He sounds like he had a different kind of wisdom. He did. Takoda's gaze remained on the fire. "When I enlisted after college, he was disappointed. Said I was turning my back on who I was. We didn't speak for nearly 2 years." "What changed?" "War," Takoda said simply. "Seeing death up close makes you think about what matters. I wrote to him from Afghanistan. He sent me this." He reached into his shirt and pulled out a small leather pouch on a cord around his neck. Opening it carefully, he revealed a tiny carved eagle, no bigger than the first joint of his thumb. "It's exquisite," Elena breathed, leaning closer to see the details. "He carved it from a branch of the juniper tree where I built my first fort as a kid, said it would bring me home." Takoda closed the pouch gently. "I was wearing it the day our convoy hit an IED. Everyone in the lead vehicle died instantly. I was thrown clear, barely a scratch." The weight of what he was sharing, not just the story, but the meaning behind it, settled over Elena. This wasn't information for her dissertation or an anecdote for her research. This was Takoda trusting her with something precious and personal. "Thank you for telling me," she said quietly. He nodded, tucking the pouch back into his shirt. "Your turn," he said, surprising her. "Tell me something real, not what you'd put in your academic papers." Elena hesitated, caught off guard by the request. What could she possibly share that would match the significance of what he'd just revealed? Her life in Chicago seemed suddenly pale and ordinary by comparison. "I'm afraid of failing," she admitted finally, staring into the fire. "Not just my dissertation, though that too. I'm afraid of reaching the end of my life and realizing I never really understood what matters." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "That's why I'm here, really. Not just for the research, but because I'm searching for something authentic. Something that can't be found in libraries or lecture halls." Takoda held her gaze, his expression thoughtful. "And have you found it?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. "I'm beginning to think I might have," she whispered. Outside, the rain finally stopped. The sudden silence was profound, broken only by the crackling of the fire and their quiet breathing. In that moment of stillness, something shifted between them, an invisible barrier dissolving like morning mist under the sun. Takoda reached out slowly, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face with unexpected gentleness. The touch was brief, almost hesitant, but Elena felt it like an electric current through her body. "It's getting late," he said, his voice low and rough. "We should both get some rest. Tomorrow will come early." Tomorrow. When she would leave this cabin, this man, this unexpected detour that had somehow become significant in ways she couldn't yet articulate. "Yes," she agreed reluctantly, "we should rest." But as they prepared for sleep, Takoda in his back room, Elena on the couch that now felt familiar, rest seemed impossible. Her mind kept returning to the moment his fingers had touched her face, to the stories they had shared, to the question that still hung unanswered in the air between them. "Have you found what you're searching for?" In the darkness, Elena traced her fingers over the spot where Takoda had touched her, wondering what morning would bring, and realizing with startling clarity that she wasn't ready to say goodbye. Dawn broke with startling clarity, the storm having washed the sky to a perfect, unblemished blue. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating dust motes that danced in golden shafts across the cabin. She sat up slowly, listening. The cabin was quiet, but the door stood slightly ajar, a gentle breeze carrying the scent of wet earth and pine. She folded the blankets, smoothing them with careful hands, then stepped outside onto the small porch. The transformation of the landscape took her breath away. Yesterday's muted palette had given way to a vibrant tapestry of colors. The red earth deeper and richer, the desert plants glistening with raindrops that caught the morning light like scattered diamonds. Distant mesas standing in sharp relief against the cloudless sky. Takoda stood at the edge of the clearing, his back to her, as he split logs with rhythmic, powerful strokes of an axe. The morning sun gleamed on his bare shoulders, illuminating the defined muscles that flexed and shifted with each movement. Elena found herself unable to look away, captivated by the grace and strength evident in his labor. As if sensing her presence, he paused, turning to meet her gaze. For a moment, they simply looked at each other across the distance, something unspoken passing between them. "Morning," he called, setting down the axe and reaching for a shirt draped over a nearby fence post. "Good morning," she replied, trying to ignore the unexpected disappointment she felt as the fabric covered his copper skin. "It's beautiful today. Desert always looks its best after rain." He approached, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "Coffee's ready inside. Mechanic called. He'll be here in about an hour." An hour. 60 minutes until she would leave this place, this man who had begun to occupy her thoughts in ways that had nothing to do with academic research. "Thank you," she said, following him inside, "for everything. Your hospitality, your stories." He poured coffee into 2 mugs, handing one to her. "You're welcome," he said simply. They sat at the table, the morning light painting stripes across the wooden surface between them. Elena cupped her mug in both hands, savoring the warmth and rich aroma. "I was thinking," she began hesitantly, "about what you shared last night, about your grandfather, the eagle carving." She met his eyes. "Would it be all right if I included some of that in my research? Not the personal details, of course, but the connection between carving and memory, tradition." Takoda studied her for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Why is this work important to you, Elena? Really?" The directness of his question caught her off guard. Not a yes or no, but a challenge to articulate something deeper. "Because I believe we're losing something vital in our rush toward progress," she said finally. "Ways of knowing that can't be measured or quantified. Connections to land and community that sustain us in ways we barely understand." She traced the grain of the wooden table with her fingertip. "My world, academia, cities, technology. It values efficiency and innovation above all. But here, you know things my world has forgotten. How to read the sky, how to listen to the land, how to make something with your hands that carries meaning beyond its function." Takoda's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "And you think writing about it will help?" "I hope so," she said earnestly. "I hope it might build a bridge of understanding, even a small one." He nodded slowly. "You can use what I told you, but get it right. No romanticizing, no simplifying." "I promise," she said, relief and gratitude washing through her. "Thank you." They finished their coffee in companionable silence. Elena found herself memorizing details of the cabin, the exact color of the morning light on the wooden walls, the pattern of the carvings arranged on the shelves, the way Takoda's hands dwarfed his coffee mug. After breakfast, she gathered her few belongings, packing them carefully into her backpack. The half-carved hummingbird caught her eye, sitting on the workbench where they had left it. "I never finished helping with this," she said, picking it up gently. Takoda moved to stand beside her, his presence warm and solid. "No," he agreed. "We ran out of time." The simple statement carried a weight that settled in Elena's chest. Time, always too little of it when it mattered most. "I wish," she began, then stopped, uncertain how to finish the thought without revealing too much. Takoda turned to face her fully, close enough that she could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes. "What do you wish, Elena?" The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibility. Elena's heart beat faster, her eyes drawn to his lips, wondering how they would feel against her own. The moment was shattered by the sound of tires on gravel, an engine's rumble breaking the morning quiet. "That'll be Sam," Takoda said, stepping back, the spell broken. Elena nodded, swallowing her disappointment. "Right, I should go meet him." They walked outside together to where a tow truck had pulled up, its yellow light bar reflecting the morning sun. A heavy-set man with a grey beard stepped out, adjusting a baseball cap. "Morning, Takoda," he called. "This must be the stranded professor." "Dr. Winters," Takoda corrected, surprising Elena with the formality. Sam wiped his hands on a rag tucked into his belt. "Well, Doc, good news is your car isn't as bad as it sounded. Water pump's shot, but I've got one that'll fit. Bad news is I can't get to it until tomorrow morning. Got 2 semis with blown tires blocking the garage bay today." Elena felt a confusing mix of emotions, disappointment at the delay in her research schedule, but also a secret thrill at the prospect of another day in Takoda's company. "Oh," she said, trying to sound appropriately concerned. "I see. Well, I suppose I can reschedule my appointments again." She glanced at Takoda, suddenly uncertain. Would he want her to stay another night? Perhaps the garage had a waiting area, or there might be a motel in the nearest town. Takoda met her gaze steadily. "You're welcome to stay," he said quietly. "If you want to. If you want to. Not out of necessity or obligation, but choice." "I'd like that," she replied, her voice equally soft. "If you're sure it's no trouble." Sam looked between them, a knowing smile tugging at his beard. "I'll come by tomorrow around 10 then. Bring the new pump, tow your car to the shop. Have you back on the road by afternoon." He tipped his hat. "Pleasure meeting you, Doc. Takoda, tell your sister I said hello." As the tow truck rumbled back down the dirt road, Elena and Takoda stood side by side, watching it disappear around a bend. "Looks like you're stuck with me for one more day," she said lightly, though her heart was anything but light. Takoda turned to her, the morning sun illuminating his face. For the first time since they'd met, he smiled fully, a transformation that caught Elena's breath in her throat. "I can think of worse fates," he said, and gestured toward the hills rising behind the cabin. "Since you're staying, there's something I'd like to show you. Something you won't find in any research paper." The invitation hung in the air between them, an offering more significant than mere words could convey. "Lead the way," Elena said, feeling as though she was agreeing to much more than a simple hike. As they gathered water bottles and Takoda packed a small lunch in a weathered backpack, Elena realized that her academic research, the reason she had come to Arizona in the first place, was now secondary to something else entirely. Something unexpected and potentially life-changing that was growing between her and this man who carved memories from wood. They walked in companionable silence, following a narrow trail that wound through juniper and sage. The morning air was cool and fresh, the earth still damp beneath their feet. Takoda moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knew the land intimately, occasionally pointing out plants or animal tracks Elena would have missed entirely. "Desert willow," he said, indicating a slender tree with delicate pink flowers. "Grandfather used the bark for pain relief. Works better than your aspirin." Elena paused to examine the blossoms, their fragrance subtle and sweet. "It's beautiful. Beautiful and useful," Takoda replied. "That's what he taught me about this land. Everything has purpose, even if we don't understand it yet." As they climbed higher, the trail became steeper, requiring more focus. Takoda offered his hand at a particularly rocky section, his grip strong and steady as he helped Elena navigate the terrain. She noticed he didn't let go immediately when they reached level ground, and she didn't pull away. The contact felt natural, as if their hands had known each other before. The trail curved around an outcropping of red stone, and suddenly they were standing at the edge of a small hidden canyon. A spring bubbled from the rock face, feeding a crystal-clear pool that reflected the sky above. Ancient petroglyphs adorned the surrounding walls, spirals, human figures, animals, their red ochre pigments still vivid against the stone. "Oh," Elena breathed, overwhelmed by the unexpected beauty of the place. "This is sacred ground," Takoda said quietly. "My people have been coming here for centuries. Place of healing, visions. Few outsiders know it exists." The significance of him bringing her here wasn't lost on Elena. This wasn't just a scenic viewpoint for tourists. This was a tangible connection to his heritage, a place that held meaning beyond words. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for trusting me with this." Takoda nodded, leading her to a smooth boulder beside the pool. They sat, shoulders nearly touching, and unpacked the simple lunch he had brought: fry bread, dried apricots, nuts, and jerky. "The petroglyphs?" Elena asked, gesturing toward the ancient artwork. "Can you tell me what they mean?" "Some of it," he replied. "That spiral represents the journey of life. Those figures there show the first emergence of the people from the earth." His hand moved, pointing to different sections of the rock wall. "But some meanings have been lost. Not everything survives translation through time." Elena thought about that, how some knowledge was inevitably lost, how some experiences resisted being captured in words or images, like the feeling she had now, sitting beside this man in this ancient, sacred place. How would she ever describe it in her dissertation? "My grandfather brought me here when I was 13, Takoda continued, his eyes on the pool's still surface. "Made me fast for 2 days, then left me alone to receive a vision." A small smile played at the corners of his mouth. "I was terrified, city-raised kid alone in the wilderness, convinced every sound was a mountain lion coming to eat me." "Did you receive a vision?" Elena asked, captivated. Not the way he hoped. Takoda picked up a small stone, turning it over in his palm. No spirit animals, no ancestral guides. Just clarity, understanding that everything is connected. The water, the stone, the sky, us. He glanced at her. "Hard to explain." "I think I understand," she said softly. "It's what I've been trying to study, that sense of connection to place that shapes identity and community. But reading about it isn't the same as feeling it." "No," he agreed. "It isn't." They fell silent, watching sunlight dance across the pool's surface. Elena was acutely aware of Takoda beside her, the rhythm of his breathing, the warmth radiating from his body, the quiet strength he carried without arrogance or display. "When you go back to Chicago," he said suddenly, "what then?" The question startled her. "I finish my dissertation, defend it, apply for teaching positions probably. And this place, these experiences, they become chapters in a book." It wasn't quite an accusation, but there was something in his tone that made Elena turn to face him fully. "Not just chapters," she said earnestly. "Takoda, what I've learned here from you, it's changing how I think, how I see the world." She hesitated, then added softly, "How I see myself." His dark eyes searched hers, looking for something beyond her words. "And how do you see yourself now?" Elena's heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't academic discourse anymore. This was raw, personal truth. "As someone who's been studying life instead of living it," she whispered. "As someone who came looking for answers but found questions I never knew to ask." She swallowed hard. "As someone who doesn't want to leave tomorrow." The confession hung between them, impossible to take back. Takoda's expression remained unreadable for a long moment, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached out to touch her face, his fingertips tracing the curve of her cheek with exquisite gentleness. "Elena," he said, her name like a prayer on his lips. The space between them seemed to disappear as he leaned closer, his breath warm against her skin. Elena closed her eyes, her body humming with anticipation. The sharp cry of a hawk broke the moment. They both looked up to see the bird circling overhead, its wings spread wide against the endless blue. "We should head back," Takoda said, his voice rough. "Storm clouds building to the west." Elena followed his gaze to where dark clouds were indeed gathering on the distant horizon. How had she not noticed them before? As they packed up their things and began the descent, Elena felt the weight of what had almost happened, and what still remained unspoken between them. With each step back toward the cabin, she wondered if they would ever find their way back to that moment by the pool, where truth had risen to the surface like the spring from stone. They reached the cabin just as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. The storm had moved faster than expected, dark clouds now looming overhead like a physical manifestation of the tension between them. Inside, the cabin felt smaller somehow, more intimate, as if the walls had drawn closer during their absence. "Another storm," Elena said, breaking the silence that had accompanied them on the latter part of their journey. "The weather here changes so quickly." Takoda moved to the fireplace, arranging kindling with practiced hands. Desert storms are like that, all waiting, then all at once. The parallel to what was building between them wasn't lost on either of them. Elena shrugged off her light jacket, hanging it on a hook by the door. Her fingers lingered on the wooden peg, tracing its smooth contours. "Did you make these too?" she asked, gesturing to the simple row of hooks. "Yes," Takoda said, striking a match. "When I first moved back, needed something to occupy my hands while my mind settled." "Your hands are never still," she observed, "always creating, building, shaping." He looked up from the growing flames, meeting her eyes across the room. "It's how I make sense of things, how I find my way through." Elena moved to the workbench, where the half-finished hummingbird still waited. She picked it up, feeling its weight and potential. "Will you teach me more?" she asked. "Before I leave tomorrow?" Takoda rose from his crouch by the fire, crossing to stand beside her. "You want to finish it?" "I'd like to try," she said, "with your help." Outside, rain began to drum against the roof, the rhythm steady and hypnotic. Inside, Takoda gathered his tools, laying them out in precise order on the workbench. Elena watched his movements, sensing a ritual in his preparations. "My grandfather believed," he said as he selected a particular knife, "that when you carve, you put part of your spirit into the wood. That's why it matters who makes a thing and what's in their heart while making it." He positioned himself behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body. Like before, he guided her hands, showing her how to hold the tools, how to follow the grain, how to listen to what the wood wanted to become. But unlike before, there was no hesitation in his touch, no careful distance maintained. His chest pressed against her back, his breath stirred her hair, his hands enveloped hers with confident pressure. "Gentle," he murmured near her ear, as she worked the knife along what would become the bird's wing. "Let the blade find its way. Don't force it." Elena tried to focus on the carving, but her senses were overwhelmed by his proximity. The scent of him, pine, smoke, and something uniquely his own, the strength in his hands as they guided hers. Time seemed to slow, measured not in minutes, but in heartbeats, in shared breaths, in the gradual emergence of the hummingbird from raw wood. Rain continued to fall outside, cocooning them in a world of their own making. "There," Takoda said eventually, his voice low and intimate. "See how the wing wants to open?" Elena nodded, unable to trust her voice. Under their combined efforts, the bird was taking shape. Delicate wings poised for flight, head tilted as if listening for nectar, body tense with potential energy. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It is," he agreed. But when she turned her head slightly, she found him looking not at the carving but at her. Their faces were inches apart, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, the slight unevenness of his upper lip, the day's stubble shadowing his jaw. "Takoda," she said, her voice barely audible above the rain. His hands stilled on hers, but he didn't move away. "This is complicated," he said, his voice rough with restraint. "I know. You're leaving tomorrow. I know that too." His gaze dropped to her lips, then back to her eyes. "I told myself to keep my distance, that you're just passing through, collecting stories for your research." His jaw tightened. "That someone like you wouldn't..." "Wouldn't what?" she prompted when he didn't continue. "Wouldn't see someone like me as anything more than a subject, an interesting cultural specimen." The words echoed their first conversation, but now there was vulnerability beneath the challenge. Elena set down the carving knife, turning fully to face him. Their bodies were still close, her back against the workbench, his arms on either side of her. "Is that what you think?" she asked, reaching up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the strong line of his cheekbone. "That I don't see you?" Something fierce flashed in his eyes. "What do you see then?" Elena Winters from Chicago. She didn't hesitate. I see you, Takoda. Not a subject, not a specimen. Just you. Complicated, talented, guarded. Her thumb brushed across his lower lip. The man who rescued me from the desert, who taught me to carve, who showed me sacred waters. His breathing had grown heavier, his hands now gripping the edge of the workbench on either side of her waist. "And what do you want?" he asked, his voice strained with the effort of control. Elena's heart hammered in her chest as she answered with the most dangerous truth she knew. "You," she whispered. "I want you." The words hung in the air between them, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low growl that seemed to vibrate through the wooden walls of the cabin. Takoda's eyes darkened, his grip on the workbench tightening until his knuckles whitened. "Elena," he said, her name a warning and a plea all at once. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I do," she insisted, her fingers still resting against the warmth of his face. "Maybe for the first time in my life, I know exactly what I want." He closed his eyes briefly, as if gathering strength. When he opened them again, they blazed with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I can't control myself when I'm with you," he confessed, voice rough like stone over stone. "You make me want things I've told myself I can't have." "Why can't you have them?" she whispered. His laugh was low, without humor. "Look at us, Elena. You're heading back to your university, your career, your world. I'm here tied to this land, to my people's ways." His hand finally released the workbench to touch her hair, the gesture achingly gentle despite his words. "We're from different worlds. Maybe," she conceded, "or maybe we're just two people who found each other when neither was looking." Her hands moved to his chest, feeling the steady hammer of his heart beneath her palm. Different doesn't have to mean impossible. Lightning flashed outside, momentarily illuminating the cabin in stark white light, casting Takoda's features into sharp relief. In that flash, Elena saw something crack in his carefully maintained control. "If we do this," he said, his voice barely audible above the rain, "there's no going back to professor and subject, no footnotes in your dissertation, no academic distance." "I don't want distance," she breathed. "I've had enough distance in my life." That was all it took. With a sound somewhere between a groan and her name, Takoda closed the final inches between them. His mouth found hers with hunger and precision, as if he'd mapped the journey 1,000 times in his mind. Elena melted into him, her arms winding around his neck as his hands spanned her waist, lifting her to sit on the edge of the workbench. The kiss deepened, years of solitude and restraint giving way to a flood of need that left them both gasping. His lips traveled to her neck, finding the sensitive place below her ear that made her shiver. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her skin. "Tell me this isn't what you want." In answer, Elena threaded her fingers through his hair, guiding his mouth back to hers. "Don't stop," she whispered against his lips. "Please don't stop." The storm outside seemed to move in tandem with their passion, thunder cracking overhead as Takoda lifted her into his arms, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to his bedroom. Rain lashed against the windows as they fell together onto his bed, hands exploring, discovering, revealing. Time lost meaning as they moved together, learning each other's bodies with the same care and attention Takoda gave to his carvings. Finding the grain, following what wanted to emerge, revealing beauty that had always been present, waiting to be uncovered. Afterward, they lay tangled in each other's arms, listening to the storm gradually subside outside. Elena's head rested on Takoda's chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear. His fingers traced lazy patterns along her bare shoulder, raising goosebumps in their wake. "You're thinking too loudly," he murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. Elena smiled against his skin. "How can you tell? Your breathing changes." His hand continued its gentle exploration of her arm, her shoulder, the curve of her spine. "What are you thinking about?" She propped herself up on an elbow to look at him, taking in his face, relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before. "Tomorrow," she admitted. "What happens when I leave?" Takoda's expression grew thoughtful, but he didn't look away. "Does something have to happen? Can't we just have this moment without plotting the next?" "Is that what you want?" she asked carefully. "Just this moment?" He reached up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch reverent. "I want more than I have any right to ask for," he said honestly. "I want to know what your face looks like in morning light. I want to hear you talk about your research with that spark in your eyes. I want to teach you to track deer through the hills and watch you try to make fry bread in my kitchen." His thumb brushed over her lower lip. "But I won't ask you to give up your life for mine. That's not love, that's possession." The word hung between them. Love, neither confirming nor denying its presence, but acknowledging its shadow. "What if I wanted to stay?" Elena asked, the question surprising even herself. Takoda's eyes searched hers. "Is that what you want?" She considered the question seriously, thinking of her apartment in Chicago, her colleagues at the university, the path she'd been walking for years. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "A week ago, I would have said my future was clear. Now..." She shook her head slightly. "Now, I'm not sure of anything except how I feel when I'm with you." He nodded, understanding in his eyes. "That's enough for now." They fell silent, listening to the occasional drip from the eaves outside, the distant rumble of thunder as the storm moved east, the soft sound of their breathing gradually synchronizing. "Tell me a story," Elena said eventually, settling back against his chest. "Something your grandfather taught you." Takoda's hand resumed its gentle stroking of her back, his deep voice rumbling beneath her ear as he spoke. "He told me once about the origin of the stars, said they were the spirits of ancestors who chose to remain in the sky to guide us, to remind us we're never truly alone." His fingers traced constellations on her skin. "When I was in Afghanistan, on nights when the fighting was bad, I'd look up at those same stars and remember his words. It helped, thinking the same lights watched over the reservation, over him." Elena thought about the countless papers she'd read about indigenous star stories, the anthropological analyses of their cultural significance. None had touched her like this simple sharing, this intimate glimpse into how such beliefs sustained a real person through real darkness. "Thank you," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his chest right above his heart. "For what?" "For showing me what I've been missing, for reminding me that knowledge isn't just in books and theories." He chuckled, the sound vibrating pleasantly against her cheek. "Does this mean I'll be quoted in your dissertation, Professor Winters?" She smiled, playfully nipping at his skin. "Maybe. Or maybe some things are too precious to be dissected by academic committees." Takoda's arms tightened around her. "And what are we, Elena? Precious or material for your research?" The question carried real weight despite his light tone. Elena raised herself to look directly into his eyes, wanting him to see the truth in hers. "We are something I never expected to find," she said softly. "Something I'm still trying to understand. But not as a researcher, as a woman who's realizing how much more there is to learn about herself, about connection, about..." She hesitated, then finished. "About what might be possible between two people from different worlds." Takoda cupped her face in his large hands, studying her with an intensity that made her heart race anew. Then he kissed her, slow and deep and thorough, as if trying to memorize the feel of her mouth against his. Outside, the clouds began to part, revealing a sky studded with stars. Those ancient lights his grandfather had spoken of, watching over them as they found solace and joy in each other's arms once more. Morning arrived with gentle inevitability, sunlight streaming through the window to find Elena and Takoda still entwined. She woke first, studying his face in repose. The worry lines smoothed away, his expression peaceful in a way it rarely was in waking hours. The weight of what they'd shared settled over her, precious and complicated. Today, she would leave. The thought created a physical ache in her chest. As if sensing her thoughts, Takoda opened his eyes, dark and clear in the morning light. "Hey," he said simply, voice rough with sleep. "Hey," she echoed, trying to memorize every detail of his face in this moment. They didn't speak much as they prepared for the day, sharing coffee at the wooden table, their fingers occasionally brushing, eyes meeting with new understanding. The air was charged, not with the electricity of the storm, but with the quiet intensity of two people trying to hold on to something they knew was slipping away with each passing minute. At precisely 10, Sam's tow truck rumbled up the dirt road. Elena's packed backpack sat by the door, the borrowed t-shirt washed and folded neatly on top, everything ready for her departure, though her heart was anything but. "I'll be back in a few weeks," she said as they stood on the porch, the morning sun warming the wood beneath their feet. "To continue my research, to conduct those interviews I had to postpone." Takoda nodded, his expression guarded again, though not as remote as when they'd first met. "I'll be here." "And we can—" she began, then faltered, unsure how to define what they might be to each other going forward. "We can figure it out," he supplied, reaching for her hand. His thumb traced circles on her palm. "One day at a time." Sam called from the truck, engine idling. "Whenever you're ready, Doc." Elena squeezed Takoda's hand, reluctant to let go. "I need to give you something," she said suddenly, reaching into her pocket. "A memory to keep." She pressed a small object into his palm, a polished stone she'd picked up by the sacred pool, its surface striped with bands of red and gold that caught the sunlight. "So you remember I was here," she said softly. "That this wasn't just research." Takoda closed his fingers around the stone, then reached back through the cabin door to retrieve something from the workbench. "For you," he said, placing the wooden hummingbird in her hand. "It's finished." Elena gasped softly. Sometime before dawn, while she slept, he must have completed the carving they'd started together. The bird was perfect, wings outstretched in flight, every detail rendered with exquisite care. "It's beautiful," she whispered, running her finger along the smooth wooden wing. "My grandfather believed that hummingbirds carry messages between worlds," Takoda said, his voice low with meaning. "Between the living and the ancestors, between people separated by distance." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them without words. This wasn't just a parting gift. It was a promise, a connection that would bind them across the miles that would soon separate them. "I don't know how to say goodbye," Elena admitted. Takoda's hands framed her face. "Then don't," he said simply and kissed her, not with the desperate passion of the night before, but with tender certainty, as if they had all the time in the world. When they parted, both their eyes were bright with emotion. "Go finish your dissertation," he said, voice rough. "Go become Dr. Winters. Just remember there's more to life than what fits in academic footnotes." Elena smiled through the ache in her chest. "I won't forget. How could I after you?" Sam honked the horn gently, reminding them of the waiting world. With a final touch of her hand against Takoda's chest, feeling his heartbeat strong beneath her palm, Elena turned and walked to the truck. Each step away from him felt like moving against a powerful current, but she kept going, clutching the wooden hummingbird like a talisman. As the truck pulled away, she looked back through the side mirror, Takoda stood watching from the porch, the morning sun casting his tall figure into sharp relief against the weathered wood of the cabin he'd made his home. Not waving, not calling out, just present, solid, real. 3 months later, Elena stood before her doctoral committee, defending the dissertation that had brought her to Arizona in the first place. Her research had evolved, informed by experience no textbook could provide. She spoke with passion and authority about the living connections between people and place, about traditions that weren't relics but vital, evolving parts of contemporary identity. When the questions ended and congratulations were offered, Dr. Elena Winters stepped outside the university building into Chicago's autumn chill. She reached into her pocket, fingers finding the smooth wooden hummingbird that had become her constant companion. Her phone chimed with a message. Takoda. Proud of you, Dr. Winters. When do you come home? Home. Not back or to visit, but home. Elena smiled, her heart light despite the weight of decision before her, the prestigious teaching position she'd been offered, the alternative path that had opened unexpectedly, the choice she needed to make. She typed her reply with steady fingers, certain in a way she'd never been before. 2 weeks. I have some things to finish here first. Then she added, I can't control myself when I'm with you either, and I wouldn't want to. She pressed send, tucked the phone away and walked forward into her future, one where academic knowledge and lived experience weren't separate worlds after all, but different paths to the same sacred pool.